So we're doing class number 3, and I'm going to go over the grahas in this class a little bit in detail. And the first class we went over the houses and over the history of Jyotish. And I apologize if I'm pronouncing the Sanskrit names wrong. You guys can probably pronounce it better. That's something I will work on in the future. And then in the second class, we went over the sun in the 12 houses. So I wanted to get into the planets in this class because that way you guys can get connected to the planets and start to understand the energies of the planets and get a better sense. So when you see any of the planets in the houses or even on the ascendant or connected with the moon, then you could get a general sense of how the planet's energy influences the person. So if the planet is connected to their ascendant or to their ascendant lord, then the person's personality and the way they're presented to the outer world, that's the planetary energy will influence that. If the planet is connected with the moon, then their emotions will perceive the world through that planet's energy. And the way we perceive our world is also connected with our emotions. So in a way, it's a very subtle thing to separate the way we perceive the world and our emotions, because the way we perceive the world, we have an emotional reaction a lot of the time. So that's how the moon. And then if a planet is connected with the sun, then it will influence how the person expresses themselves. So the sun is a positive planet and the moon is a negative planet, but not in terms of good and bad. So what I mean by positive and negative is the sun is an extrovert. So the sun is the way we project ourselves out into the world, and the moon is what we receive. So the sun is transmissive and the moon is receptive. So the sun is how we project ourselves out to others and to the world. And the moon is how we receive the impressions of others and the impressions that we receive of the world around us, our perceptions of the world. So that's what I mean by negative. The moon is negative in the sense that it is receptive, and so it receives impressions, and you can kind of see the yin and yang of the sun and the moon. The sun is in the daytime, it projects the sunlight, and the moon at night receives the light of the sun and reflects that. And so the moon is reflective as well. And so I'll start with the sun, and then I'll just go in order, and I might just go back and forth with a couple of planets just for the sake of comparing them and in order to better understand the archetype of the planets. So the sun represents our soul. It represents the self and the willpower. It represents the father also. And
I think, Monica.
Go ahead. Say that again.
Are you presenting scrolling something? Because we just see the first slide.
Oh, yeah. Sorry. Thank you for pointing that out. And actually, I wanted to do what I did last time, which was, as I was talking about the significations, I was writing them down. So thank you for pointing that out. So the sun represents The father, the soul, it is the transmissive planet. It's graha better because it's not a planet, but the graha. And it represents how we portray ourselves in the public life. And I'll just write these down quickly. It is also courage and confidence. So all of this is transmissive. These are all transmissive qualities. So if you can get, the gist of the balance between transmissive and receptive, then you can kind of start being creative in understanding the energy of the sun, the hot, fiery energy. So courage, it takes courage, it takes willpower to be able to transmit or, express ourselves in the world. So it also has to do with glory, with fame. The sun, of course, fame, it wants to be the center of attention. With influence, reputation, how others perceive us, the way we project ourselves and the way others perceive us. But it is also in a spiritual sense, it's a self-realization graha as well. In the physical sense, it generally has to do with vital energy. And vital energy is, it is not only physical energy. Vital energy is the balance between the mind, body, and spirit. So vital energy, a person can have a very weak physical constitution, but if they have vital energy, if they have that solar quality of willpower and the strength of the soul, if they have strength of the soul, then they have vital energy. And so they will, because they have vital energy on a mental and spiritual level, then even if they have a weak constitution physically, the vital energy will still make them strong and will still overcome whatever physical limitations they may have. So the soul represents the sun represents the vital energy, which is the balancing energies of mind, body, and spirit. And so it also represents general health. It represents the heart, the stomach, the bones. It represents the right eye, whereas the moon represents the left eye. And it is a Pitta planet in Ayurveda. Now, because the sun represents the self, it is the core of the horoscope. It is a very important point, which, of course, I mentioned this. Sorry that I spelled Surya wrong here. I mentioned this in the last class. It's one of the key points in a chart to look at. The other two being the ascendant and the moon. So the moon, the ascendant, and the sun are three key aspects to look at the horoscope. And I mentioned this in the last class because it's the way we express ourselves. It is an expressive planet. It is a creative planet as well, graha, because it rules the sign of Leo. So if we look at what Leo represents, Leo is the natural fifth house of the zodiac. And the fifth house is a creative house. It's the house of creativity, and it is the house of learning. It is the house of entertainment and joy, expansiveness, and it is the house of romance as well. So all these things that are represented by the sign of Leo, you can connect with the qualities of the sun as well, and with the house, with the fifth house. So qualities that are attributed to the sign of Leo or to the 5th house also apply to the sun. And let's see here. Vikas, do you want to add something?
Yeah, other two things is sun also represents boss. So if you want to look at the relationship with the boss in whom you report to, generally you look at the strength of the sun too. Also, it might sometimes represent ego, is what I think, because a bad sun can, if afflicted by bad planets, can cause bad ego.
Right. Yes, that's a very good point. And so first, let's talk about the boss. Yes, it represents our supervisors, the boss, because the sun gets directional strength in the 10th house of the zodiac. The 10th house is the house of the career, but it is the house of the boss as well. It is the house of our supervisors, of those that are above us, who are authority figures. So definitely the situation of the sun in a birth chart will also indicate our relationship to any superiors or supervisors or people who are in authority figures in our life. And in terms of the ego, yes, also obviously, the sun, so there's a positive aspect and then there's a shadow side to every single graha, to every single sign, to every single house, bhava in astrology. So the positive aspects are, of course, what we talked about, but the shadow side of, for example, the shadow side of Surya is that it may have too much ego also. The sun, when it's expressing itself in its shadow side, then what it does is it shines too bright. It tends to become too hot. So it's too much in its own essence, and it forgets about everyone else. It forgets that other people exist. It's all about me. When it's expressing itself in the shadow side, it's like it's all about me. I want to shine. That's why it's exalted in the sign of Aries. The sign of Aries is a very individualistic Rashi. It is the Rashi that has to do with individuation. It's the first sign of the zodiac. It is the sign where people learn to individuate themselves, become separate and express themselves and become strong in their own personality. And so the sun is exalted there because when the sun is in Aries, the person has a strong personality and it has a strong sense of leadership and of being in charge and taking the initiative. And it uses of course, the sun is fiery and Aries is a fire sign. And the sun will do well in any of the other fire signs as well. But in the sign of Aries, there's that ego quality of I am the authority figure and people have to look up to me. So when people have a strong sun in the chart, they tend to, especially when the sun is exalted in Aries, for example, they want to have a story in life. They express strong dharma. It is about purpose in life. It is about the dharma. They want to have a story of, I'm here in the world to help others, or they want to have, especially in the sign of Aries, because the sign of Aries is also a sign that has to do with wanting to, wanting to be the hero, wanting to have the courage and be the hero and be looked up to, kind of like the hero in the movie that takes down all the enemies, and they're the ones that are here to shine and to shed light on others. And so they like to have that drama story of being seen as great and powerful and mighty. And so as a result, they are interested in having a story. They're not interested in doing if they are the ones that are here to shed light on others, then that means that everyone else is here to look up to them. So where the ego comes in is it is very challenging for a strong sun person to defer to others. That's one of the challenges and shadow side also of the sun, is they have a challenging time to let others be the boss of them. Because after all, they're the ones that are here to shed light on everyone else. And so sometimes the blind spot with this is that they want to have, they know it all, for example, in their mind. They want to be the leaders of others, but they have a hard time looking at others as authority figures and listening to the advice of other people and deferring to others. And so one of the things that one of the things to learn for the people who have a strong sun in the chart, a prominent sun, so maybe a sun on the ascendant or sun in Aries, or a sun with Rahu, because Rahu will exacerbate anything that it is conjoined. So when Rahu's with the sun, then that's like the sun on steroids. That's like the sun, sun in Aries, it's already powerful and strong, but then you get sun with Rahu, and then now you have someone who's, in a very exaggerated way of, I'm really here to shed light on everyone else. And so that makes it even more challenging to look up to others from their perspective. So one of the learning lessons of people with prominent sun in the chart is learning about humility and learning to trust other people as well, to actually to let themselves be able to learn from other people, and to learn to have the humility to also let other people shine. And when they're in a relationship, the learning lesson of the person who has the prominent sun is to be able to let the other person also shine, to be able to retreat a little bit and actually make it about the other person also, not just make it about, it's about me, and you should know that I'm here to shed light on you and everyone else, but they should allow the other person and listen. So that is one of the challenges and one of the learning lessons of the sun, is to be able to balance the energy of the moon into the life. So when there's too much sun, there's too much heat, there might not be enough receptivity, not enough ability to receive from others. They're just so blind in their ability to shed light and to shine. That's the challenge. That's the learning lesson. So did you want to add something to that, anybody?
Yeah. Also, what I thought was, I was thinking. No, I just forgot what I was thinking.
Sure, no problem.
Okay, I was thinking about. So, did you cover the zodiac?
Yeah.
Oh, you did. So, yeah, what I wanted to add was, so since if you count the zodiac, Aries is 1, Taurus 2, Gemini 3, 4 is Cancer, 5 is Sun, right? Mm-hmm. So the 5th house, from the natural zodiac, Sun rules the 5th house. So if you divide our human body from top to bottom into 12 equal parts, the sun is 5th part. So the first part is the eyes, The second part is the actually a little bit below the eyes. The third part is from the tongue to the throat. The fourth part is the chest, and the fifth part is the stomach. So Monica covered this a bit. She mentioned sun. Sun signifies stomach as well. So that is the reason why sun signifies stomach, because he's a natural ruler for the fifth house, and that's why he also represents ego as well. And if you have an afflicted sun or sun in a bad place, so you might have troubles with your stomach, diseases with related to stomach. So in general, any planet that is that is afflicted in a specific house, you might have that problem of or disease related to that house. The simple example is moon. If the moon is in Nicha or debilitated, so moon is natural significator of the fourth house, right? So which is Karka or Cancer. So people who have debilitated moon can have problem with heart or the chest area. So in general, that is the rule that the natural significator is also important as well as the individual, the specific significator. That's one part I wanted to add.
Yeah, that's a very good point. And that goes into a little bit more advanced, but for sure you look at it, the fifth house from the ascendant, you can look at the fifth house from the moon, the fifth house from the sun, and the sun itself. And if all those places have affliction, then you can, with more confidence, say the person may be having stomach problems at some time in their life, probably especially during the sun dasha or bhukti. And something that you something that's connected with the sun, the stomach, that is having to do with the ego, is the chakra that is there is the solar plexus, which is the third chakra from the solar plexus. How do you say the solar plexus chakra in Sanskrit?
Also,
Manipura. It's Manipura, the Manipura chakra. So the solar plexus has to do with what? The third chakra has to do with domination, with wanting to conquer. The third chakra has to do with willpower. And another thing that's connected with the stomach is, the sun is a pitta planet in Ayurveda, which is hot. Pitta is heat. And so the digestive system, the stomach burns the food. The stomach digests, and in digestion, it is burning up the food. It is heat. So that's another connection with the sun, heat, the stomach, the solar plexus, the Manipura chakra, which has to do with, power, domination, wanting to conquer, so people probably who have, something that has affliction towards the sun, whether it's excessive, or, too much or too little, then they might have a solar plexus chakra issue as well. And so, one of the ways of ameliorating is working with the solar plexus chakra. But what were you saying, Vikas?
I was trying to say a small thing. Monica always talks about graha, right? So there is a misconception that a graha, like the English translation of a graha, is a planet. But no, the English translation of a graha is a heavenly body. So people who do not know this kind of, they don't feel good about astrology, because how can sun be a planet when the science regards sun as a star? So graha is not a planet. Graha means a heavenly body.
Yeah, graha means to seize, and that's a very good point, and it's something that I did cover in the first class. And because I'm just using mostly just the English terminology, but something that I did go over in the first class was that, these are not planets, these are grahas, and graha means to seize. To seize is, let me write it down here. To seize. And so, so they seize you. They're energetic powers. They're energies that seize you. They seize us. They seize our psychology or our mind, bodies, and spirits. It's an energy. And so I'll probably, since I'm using the English terminology, I'm using planet, but I mean graha. I mean, it sounds funny to say, the planet sun, the moon planet, the Rahu planet, but yes, that's a very good point, because it's graha. And so they're energetic powers that seize us. And in terms of heavenly body, what you were saying, in the West, we really don't think about the planets as deities, but in Vedic astrology, they are actually deities. They are actually energetic beings. It's not just an energy. It's not just the planet, but it's actually an actual being. It's a consciousness. So it's actually considered a living being that seizes us, the energy that seizes us. And we can actually even say that those beings are looking at us, and they seize us with their eyes. They seize us with their look. And however it is that they're placed in the chart, in our charts, that is the way they are seeing us with their eyes. They are seizing us with that kind of energy. But thank you for pointing that out. And one other thing I wanted to point out with Surya is he is Nicha in the sign of Libra. And why do you guys think he is debilitated in the sign of Libra? What is you guys' supposition? Anybody? Somebody? Hello?
So, Sun is represented as a first house. So the seventh house is Libra. So I'm guessing because he's 7 houses away from the first house, his power goes down as he moves down through the houses.
Yeah, very good. Yes. So that is a very good point. It is exalted in Aries, and one of the other reasons that it is debilitated in Libra is because the first house represents us, our individuality. The 7th house represents others. It represents our partners, our partnership. It represents other people. So when the sun is in the sign of Libra, then what happens is if the sun feels uncomfortable in the house of other people because it has to learn to compromise. And it doesn't feel comfortable doing that. That is one of the lessons of the sun. One of the lessons is learning to compromise and to become humble in the presence of other people. The sun feels very uncomfortable doing that because, after all, the sun is the one that leads. He's the authority figure. He's the individual, the leader. And that is the reason he is debilitated. But debilitated doesn't mean, it is not necessarily a negative thing unless there are other factors in the chart. So always remember this, and I'll probably repeat this over and over and over. If any planet is debilitated, the one single factor of debilitation does not mean the planet is weak. What makes a planet weak is when it's afflicted by 3 things at least. So if it's debilitated and aspected by Saturn and aspected by Mars or Rahu or Ketu, then when it's 3 things, then you can say, okay, the sun is weak and afflicted. If it's only in the sign of Libra, which, yes, that means it's debilitated, but if it's with no other influence, just in the sign of Libra, then what that means is that the person knows how to defer to others. The person is learning those lessons and is actually learning to be humble. So actually, it's a good placement for the sun when it's not afflicted by other planets. It is a good placement because it means that the person is not going to be imposing their will on other people. It means that the person knows how to defer to other people and how to let others shine as well. So it is actually a good placement as long as it's not afflicted by other planets. When it is afflicted by other planets, usually it will be, the affliction will show itself in having too little willpower. So if there's no affliction, that's fine. There's a balance between shining and letting others shine. But if it's actually afflicted with Saturn and, K2, or for example, then the person needs to learn about willpower. Then the person needs to actually gain up their confidence. They will probably have low self-esteem, low confidence. They feel insecure, expressing themselves, expressing their energy, transmitting their light to other people. Then that's where the affliction comes in. So that's the difference between too much sun, in Aries and not enough in Libra. And you can, so when the sun is in Libra, it is similar to when the sun is in the 7th house, because this Libra is the natural 7th house of the natural 7th sign of the zodiac. So you can kind of extrapolate and say a similar thing when sun is in the 7th house. It'll be, the person will know how to defer to other people. The problem that they may encounter if the sun is in the 7th house is that the partner that they end up getting with might be too dominating towards them. And so the lesson that this person has to learn is how to have balance between them imposing their will, I think imposing their will is not the best way to say it. How to learn to defer to others in a humble way, but in a balanced way, where the person is still confident. The person is confidently letting others shine, but it doesn't mean that they have low self-esteem. They're just confident in their own self-esteem, in their own selves, in their own sense of being, but they allow others to also shine. That's a healthy sun. And so one of the things when the sun is in the 7th house is the other person, the partner, the spouse, for example, tends to be overbearing. Then that person will express the qualities of the sun. The person will be overbearing, will have too much inflation, maybe too much of an inflated ego. And so the person who has the sun in the 7th house is learning to deal with that energy as coming from someone else. And so the balance of letting them, letting the other person show their energetic strength or willpower, but at the same time learning to stand up for oneself. Because when the sun is, like I said, debilitated in Libra, they let others shine too much, but at the cost of them losing their self-esteem and their confidence.
Did you cover the houses, Monica?
Yes.
Yes, I went over the houses in the first class.
Great. So just to add to the energy and stuff, people who are from India, generally we hear this term like Sandhya, right? Evening, like the period between the sunset and just after sunset. So it is said that you should not sleep during sunset, you should not do certain things during sunset. This is the exact reason Monica just mentioned is the sun during sunrise is in the first house. At noon or midday, it's in the 10th house. In the evening, it's in the 7th house. So that is where the sun's energy is at minimal. So that's why people who follow astrology and people who follow, especially people from India, they say do not sleep during during that period of during the sunset, because during sunset sun is in the 7th house. So generally, good things are done only during sunrise or just before sunrise, because sun is in the first house. And this is the analogy, not analogy, but this is the reason why we say, like people in India say, do not do things that matter to you the most during sunset, because the sun's energy is minimal, and sun's energy is most important for any success of any activity, along with other factors, sure, but sun's energy is also pretty important. And people who follow Vedic marriages, you also can notice no marriage is done during sunset. Again, sun in the 7th house, not good. Again, Monica spoke about it. Sun in the 7th house, it causes a lot of energy for the other person. So, and that's why marriages are also not performed during sunset. So it's either at sunrise or after sunset or midday. Generally, it is midday between 11 and 12, if not after sunset. Nothing is done during that period, 2 hours period of sunset.
Yeah, that's actually, I'm glad you pointed that out, because the first house is the sign of Aries. They're congruent. They correlate with each other. So sun being exalted in Aries, when the sun is placed in the first house, it gives the similar qualities of sun exalted in Aries, because it is the first sign. It is the house of the individual, of the self. And the sun shines the best in the morning. And, when, as you said, because during the day it shines best when the sun is bright, after dawn, when the sun is going up in the sky, it shines best. So it makes sense that when we're talking about endeavors and getting things done, if we're going to get things done that require activity, that require energy, that require willpower, it is best to do it when the sun is bright in the sky. And when we are going to do activities that require meditation, require introspection, and require going into ourselves, then it is best doing those things at night, when the moon's energy is expressing itself. So yeah, that is a very good point. And that is a way of living with the energies and learning how to work with the energies in our daily lives, how to incorporate that in the things that we do. So, the energy of the planets, or of the sun and the moon especially, that we see in everyday life, they're all around us. We can see the qualities of them in our daily lives. And if we work with those archetypes in our daily lives, if we think about, sunrise, what is sunrise? How does it feel in the morning? Then we can start connecting with the sign of Aries. We can start connecting with the nakshatras as well. We can start connecting with the energies of the planets in that way. Then we get a real feel of what the energy is like when we actually make connections in our minds with, okay, this activity, what is it connected to? And then, okay, it's transmissive. It's, it gives power. Then what is it connected to? Is it more to the sun, or is it more connected to the moon? And then we can kind of think, okay, should I do this in the morning, or should I do this in the evening when the sun is setting, when the sun is rising, or when the sun is setting? I like that. That's a very good point that you brought up, because All right, so we'll continue with the moon. Okay, so the moon is indicative of the mind, the emotions, the mother, nurturing, sustenance, receptivity. So the moon is ruled by this, or the moon rules the sign of Cancer. So the sign of Cancer will have these qualities as well. The moon also represents, it is a sociable planet. It is connected to the public as well. It is connected to women in general. And this is, you can see the yin and the yang between the sun and the moon. The sun represents men. The moon represents women in general. The sun is transmissive. Men tend to be more power-oriented, more dominating, more wanting to be in charge. The moon represents receptivity and nighttime, and that when you go in and you go home and you want to just cuddle on the couch and, cover yourself and have a cup of tea or something and be warm and receptive and meditate and read a book or whatnot. And the quality of the yin yang, the quality of women is the quality of nurturing others. The woman is the one that has that suckles the baby, that nurtures the baby, that the quality of protecting. So let me write that down also. Protective energy. It wants to protect. It wants to give others nurturing and love and that quality of compassion. So women tend to express those qualities naturally. Of course, all of us have yin yang in ours. Just because we are of a specific gender doesn't mean that we are necessarily that quality. It doesn't mean those qualities aren't dominant in our lives. There's a lot of women who are very strong in willpower, and there's a lot of men who express the nurturing quality more. And so these are all archetypes that exist in our psyche. And so the moon represents the nighttime when we recede into the negative aspects of our life, but not negative in a bad way, but negative in a way of learning to receive, learning to be open, and learning to understand. So the moon is a graha that has to do with understanding at an emotional level. It has to do with the mind, it has to do with the mind and the emotions. The fourth house has to do with the chest area, the heart. So the fourth house, the sign of Cancer, and the moon has to do with our feelings, with our mind. So it has to do with peace of mind. So when there's affliction to the moon or to the fourth house, then there may be lack of peace. There may be this certain dissonance in the emotions, or a certain quality of the mind being a monkey mind, where it cannot stop moving. It's just moving from one thought to another thought, and it doesn't have peace. It doesn't have a quality of peace. When the moon is strong in a chart, when the moon is, for example, sitting in the fourth house, it gets directional strength, which is Digbala in the fourth house. I'll write that down. It gets directional strength in the fourth house. It is the natural sign of Cancer. So the moon and Venus, they both get directional strength in the fourth house. When the moon is in the fourth house, there is an ability to express these qualities of the moon better. In general, when the moon is strong, the ability to express the qualities of the moon are strong. So the ability to give nurturance to others, to provide sustenance, to give emotional security to other people, and to have that emotional security in ourselves. When we don't have emotional security, then we don't have peace of mind. And so the fourth house having to do with peace of mind. This is why it is recommended that we meditate, because meditation, which is an aspect that's connected with, with the dark, with the nighttime, with learning to receive, to be receptive, to close our mind to thoughts, and to, when the sun is dominating our minds, that's when we're trying to take control and be in control of everything, and want to do everything at once, and want to take care of responsibilities and do our duties and this and that. But we also need to balance that out with a quality of meditation. And there's many ways of meditating, but when we sit down and let the mind rest at peace, then we are at the same time strengthening the moon. So especially when someone has a moon that is afflicted in a chart, the best way to counteract that is through meditation. The reason the moon may be afflicted is because the person when they were children, maybe they did not have a peaceful upbringing, or their home life might not have been peaceful. Same thing goes when the second house or the fourth house is afflicted in a chart. The person might have grown up in an environment that was conducive to too much stress. And so because that's part of what they grew up with in their environment, when they become adults, they don't have a peaceful mind. They didn't learn the security. Maybe they didn't receive the nurturing and security that they needed when they were children. So when they're adults, they're not able to give that back to others because they didn't receive it themselves. And so one way to counteract that is through meditation. If they learn to meditate within this moon, then they are strengthening their moon. So that's one of the things I wanted to point out as well, is that the chart that we are born with, these are the samskaras that we came with in this life. These are the energies that we came with, the karmas. But we can also, it is a dynamic relationship between determinism and free will. It's not just about deterministic, and it's not just about free will. There is a dynamic relationship between determinism and free will. So yes, the chart determines our karmas, and the chart does determine how we will experience life in the dasha system. But there's also the dynamic relationship of willpower and our free will. So when we use our free will to counteract the energies of the grahas in our charts, then we are actually strengthening those grahas, whichever one we're working with. So if we're working with the moon, we are strengthening the moon every time we nurture others, or every time we meditate. Every time we do something that has to do with the signification of the moon, we are actually strengthening the moon in our chart. So when somebody has a very afflicted moon in their chart, like let's say the moon is in the 8th house, for example, and aspected by Mars and Saturn, for example. That person has a lot of insecurity stemming from lack of, security in their own life when they were children, growing up, for example. That's one example. It could have expressed itself in other ways, but that's one example. One way that person can learn to counteract that is by giving nurturing to others, nurturing others, and this can include pets as well. So having a pet and learning to give it love and whatever they lacked, whatever the moon represents. This will strengthen their moon, and at the same time it will take their mind off of their own depression. And so when they do things that are represented by the moon, by the planet that is afflicted, you are strengthening that. So if you're working for other people, like let's say the person has an afflicted moon, if they go do volunteer work, then they are nurturing other people. They are nurturing others and helping society. Then they will automatically lessen the depression that they might be in, because their mind is already on nurturing others, and the moon will immediately start, in the beginning it takes a while to pick up speed, but once it picks up speed, then the strength becomes, it'll pick up speed like a snowball that picks up speed as it goes down the hill. The person, as they become more nurturing towards others, they will become less depressed. So there's a dynamic tension between, or a relationship between the chart. And so this is a good reason why it's good to know what planets we have weak in our charts, because then we can see what we could work on. If the sun is weak, then we want to express more willpower, etc. You guys understand that. In terms of the body parts, the moon represents the fluids, the body fluids. It represents the heart, as I already mentioned. It represents the spleen. It represents the mind, the blood, the left eye. It represents sleep. So our quality of sleep, are we able to get enough sleep at night? The moon represents that. It is a Kapha planet in Ayurveda. And it represents the belly as well. It represents, in terms of directions, it represents the northwest. And yes.
What is Kapha?
Kapha is the watery aspect of Ayurveda. So we have Kapha, Vata, and Pitta. Kapha is the watery aspect. Pitta is the fiery aspect. And Vata is air, the air aspect.
Okay. And you said it also represents, what is that? Same as the sun?
Belly?
Yeah.
So so the sun represents the stomach in terms of the digestive fire, the digestive system. But the moon represents the belly in terms of like the accumulation of fluids. So that's the difference between.
Belly is I mean, people get again. Technically, belly is not stomach. So belly is just above the stomach. So stomach is whatever is below the pancreas, below the spleen. That is stomach. Anything that is from the chest until just above the stomach is what moon rules. So Monica mentioned moon rules spleen, because spleen is in the belly. It's right above the stomach area. Pancreas is right above the stomach area, like the liver part. So everything is just above the stomach is ruled by moon. And
yeah, nice. That's
yeah, belly is a little bit different from the stomach. So even though we use it very interchangeably in our daily thing, belly is right above the stomach.
Yeah, that's a good way of describing it. Yeah. Now, the moon represents the northwest, which I didn't mention the sun. The sun represents the east. Obviously, that makes sense because the sun rises in the east. And the moon represents the northwest. Don't ask me why. Because do you know why? The reason it represents the northwest?
No, I don't.
Yeah. The moon also, as I mentioned, represents the public, social life. And so the moon, when a person has a full moon, when a person is born during a full moon, that means that in the chart, the moon and the sun are opposite each other. Like let's say the sun is in Aries and the moon is in Libra. Those are opposite signs from each other. That person will have been born during a full moon. And when the sun and the moon are together in a chart, they were born during a new moon, during a dark moon. So when the person is born during a full moon, then the person tends to express the qualities of the moon very strongly as well. They are very sociable. They are very likable. They shine. They shine in terms of nurturing others. They know how to work with the public. They know how to interact with other people on an emotional level. And so people are attracted to that. At night when you go out and you see a full moon, it catches your attention. When you go out and there's a full moon, you don't look at the sky and look at a star next to it. You're probably going to look at the moon first and be amazed by how beautiful it is and the brilliant light that it's just the beauty, the soft and gentle beauty of the moon, of the full moon at night. We become captivated by that quality. So when a person has a full moon, it is the same thing. They have this captivating, beautiful quality, and we become attracted to people who have a full moon in the chart. And these people who have a full moon, they tend to be in the public eye. They tend to be, they may be famous or they may just be well known. But they tend to have good reputation. They tend to be very likable by other people. And they tend to work in a setting that has to do with the public in general, because they have the ability to work with others and to give nurturance and the quality of giving of themselves to other people in a compassionate manner or in a compassionate way. When a person is born during a dark moon, when the moon is with the sun, they're together in the same house. They are born during the dark moon. So this person will be more introverted. So they will not be as they will not be like the full moon person that wants to be in the public's eye and loves to be with people in the public. And the person with the dark moon tends to have dark thoughts, like not evil thoughts. There's a difference. Like I said, the difference between the positive and negative charge doesn't mean that one is good and one is bad. It's just yin and yang. When the person has a dark moon, their thoughts tend to be more introverted. They tend to be more protective of themselves. They tend to not open up as much with other people. It takes a while for them to allow themselves to open up emotionally towards other people. So the dark moon is going to have a harder time, being famous, probably because they don't want to be famous. They would rather just stay indoors. They would rather have a private life. The full moon person wants to be famous. They love having the public life. The dark moon, they're not interested in that as much.
Hey, Monica.
Yes.
I have a couple of questions. So dark moon means more sun and less moon. Like more sun is more effective in that house, and moon is less effective.
Well, when it's not which one is, that one has more to do with how they're interacting with other planets. So when they're together in a chart, it doesn't mean that what you're saying has, okay, I see what you're saying. That could be one way of describing the person, yes. It could indicate that the person has too much ego, too much sun, where it overpowers the moon. It overpowers their emotional quality. So they tend to express themselves more in a, in a dominant way, but they have a more difficult time allowing themselves to be vulnerable. They have a more challenging time letting other people see their vulnerability. They have a harder time giving other people nurturing, the nurturing aspect. And I think I'm getting a little bit of feedback on your side.
Yeah, I'm not muted yet because I have one more question to ask.
Yeah.
So how can you tell if the person has a dark moon or full moon from the chart?
If the person has sun and moon in the same house, that is a dark moon. If the person has sun and moon in opposite houses, one is in Aries and the other one is in Libra, for example, those are opposite from each other. So when that's a full moon, the person was born during a full moon.
So to add to what Monica said, this is nothing but Tithi. People who understand Vedic days. A Vedic day is different from a calendar day. So as the moon moves away from the sun, it is bright moon. As the moon moves towards the sun, it is a dark moon. So that's where we get like an entire 28-day cycle of the moon.
Yes.
So can I add something, Monica?
Yeah.
So 3 things. One thing is moon is a very, very fickle planet or graha. So as we can see during the night sky, the moon changes form every day. So it moves fast. It changes form every day. So mind is like that. So that's why mind is ruled by the moon, because our mind is very fast. Our mind can go to places where you cannot go physically, right? So moon represents, that's why it represents mind. It represents emotions too, because our emotions as a human, they actually seesaw, to be frank. Like every moment we don't know what our emotions look like. So moon is very fickle minded. In whichever house the moon is, that those properties of the house like represents like the fickleness. For example, if the people who have moon the ascendant have a very fickle-minded nature. Like this moment they would say something, the very next moment they would change their opinion. So that's what moon does to you. Whether if moon is afflicted, it's even worse. If moon is in a good position and stuff, it's better basically. So in general, moon represents fickleness, and the nature of the house, it depends, right? So because the moon is so fickle. Second thing I wanted to add was we talked about women, right? So I wanted to add, again, this is something I heard from my Guruji, and so I didn't read it anywhere, but I just heard it from once. But again, Monica, correct me if I'm wrong. So moon rules menstrual cycle in women, basically, because that's why moon is 28 days the menstrual cycle is 28 days. So if moon is afflicted in women, that's a very good indication of some gynec problems women could have. The afflicted moon or anything bad with the moon that could lead to gynec problems is one thing I heard. Again, I just heard once while in the very first part of my thing with Vedic astrology. That's with woman and moon, mind and emotions, and fickle-mindedness.
Yep, that's a very good point. I think there is something to that with moon having to do with the menstrual cycle. Of course, they're connected with each other. So yes, if the person has a very afflicted moon, then they may have menstruation cycle anomalies. And the same goes with, you said the person is fickle. So I think, yes, for sure, the moon is a fickle planet. It moves very quickly. It moves around the zodiac in 28 days, whereas the sun moves, it takes a whole month to move from one sign to another sign. So in terms of the yin and yang, moon is more perseverant and stubborn. More moon or sun has more staying power. It stays longer. It has more willpower. It has staying power to fight the fight. But the moon doesn't have that as much. The moon has, like you said, it's fickle. It's a monkey mind. So the moon is very changeable. Very changeable. It changes its mind. It moves around when it's afflicted. But when the moon is strong, though, like let's say there's a full moon. Let's say the moon is in the 4th house, because the 4th house, it gets Digbala in that house. It is strong in the 4th house. Then the person has emotional security. The person has peace of mind. The person is tranquil. So I think when the moon is strong, when it's a full moon, the moon is able to express itself fully. I think when the moon is strong in a person's chart, then the person knows how to just be, how to just enjoy beingness. And I think in that way, it means that their moon is not as fickle. I think when the moon is strong, I think it's probably not going to be as fickle, because there will be emotional stability. When there's emotional stability, then the person knows how to stay with one subject or with one thing, because they have that stability. They have the happiness. And then that's another thing that's represented by the moon is happiness. The peace of mind is obviously having to do with happiness. So when a person is happy and they're in a good emotional state of well-being, and they're happy and they're in a good state of mind, then the mind's not fickle in that moment. Like, let's say you have a moment of peace and happiness that lasts a couple of hours. Maybe you're happy, you're enjoying yourself, you're at peace, you have emotional stability, emotional security. Then your mind's not moving around like a monkey mind. That's when when the mind is running around like a monkey mind, then that's when we don't have peace and stability. So yeah, I think when the moon is strong in a chart, the person knows how to just be and how to just be receptive.
2 more things. So Monica also talked about this. Moon is a highly reflective planet. Again, I would like to add a little bit on that. So Moon is a highly reflective planet. So whichever planet aspects the moon reflects its energy. An example, Monica again touched briefly about it. Mars aspecting moon. So Mars is a fiery planet. Mars stands for short-temperedness. So if Mars aspects moon, that kind of person can be really short-tempered. he can really take off. So moon is a highly reflective planet. On the other hand, like Monica also talked about sun and moon being 1 and 7 from each other, which is a full moon day. So now moon will be reflecting all the energy of the sun, which means what? You have a really good position of sun and moon, right? So one thing you need to understand is moon is a very highly reflective planet. It reflects everything. Another example is Saturn. Saturn is again stressful energy. Saturn is the one who is the main planet responsible for giving the results of our karma. So if Saturn aspects moon, moon does reflect whatever Saturn gives. So this is a very important class according to me, because understanding the nature of each planet is really, really important to analyze the horoscope. And I've been through these classes twice from my Guruji, and this is the third time. And I always found this class is the most important. And understanding the nature of each and every planet, how it moves across the night sky. And like example, moon is a reflective planet. Just by understanding it, you can understand how the moon's impact with other planets would be. So similarly with Sun and Mars. So please make notes. This is a pretty important class for me. People who are looking to really learn this seriously, please make note all the notes.
Yep. I wanted to also compare the moon with Mercury, because since they both have to do with the mind, and many times there's some confusion as to, well, they both have to do with the mind, so what's the difference? So just quickly, the moon represents the way we perceive the world. It is perceiving, it is receptive, it is just an observer. It does not judge. It does not analyze what it is seeing. So Mercury is the analytical mind. So that is the difference. The moon just sits down and watches and just perceives what's going on, and subjectively the moon receives impressions in a subconscious mind. So the moon is more the subconscious mind. It receives impressions that go directly to the subconscious mind, and it might even bypass our conscious mind, and it goes to our subconscious mind. It is the impressions that we receive that affect us intuitively and subconsciously. The Mercury, on the other hand, has more to do with analyzing, categorizing, organizing. It wants to put everything in order. It wants to analyze in detail everything that it sees. When it is learning a subject, it wants to understand why. It wants to put A, B, and C in, on a column, and 1, 2, and 3 on a row. So it wants to always just categorize everything. It wants to name. Mercury has a thing for naming things. It wants to name everything. And it wants to be able to analyze all that. So Mercury has to do with knowledge, and the moon has to do with intuitive understanding. So I wanted to just make that point between the moon and Mercury, and the difference between the two. And
again, I always have this confusion: knowledge versus analyzing power. I always think Jupiter rules knowledge and Mercury rules analyzing power. So when you say, again, there are two thoughts. Some people say knowledge and analyzing power, they're the same, but I don't know. For me, they're two different things. Knowledge is different from analyzing power.
Well, knowledge is what you memorize. Some knowledge, it is you take the time to memorize things, and you build your knowledge. You build a repertoire. So Mercury would be that list that you have of memorized things. Mercury is the planet of memorization. So there's this aspect of just memorizing things. Jupiter's different. Jupiter is wisdom. Jupiter represents spiritual understanding, spiritual wisdom. It represents, philosophy. And so Mercury is not a philosophical planet unless it is connected, in some way with Jupiter. Or other aspects in a chart, obviously. But Jupiter is more the philosopher. Jupiter wants to understand the deep significance of things. Jupiter wants to understand. Mercury just wants to analyze and memorize and categorize things. Mercury is more like, Mercury is like people, like the mathematician, or people working with numbers or words, or Mercury is more like the parrot who just repeats what it hears, but it doesn't necessarily know what it's saying. Like the parrot, just you teach it to say something and it repeats it exactly the way you said it. It will mimic you. Mercury rules Gemini, and Gemini is the sign of it's the twins. It's the mimicking. It's the mirror. So it knows how to mimic others. And Mercury is the planet having to do with just hearing and repeating like a parrot. But Jupiter is wisdom. Jupiter understands the wisdom of why. Jupiter sees the forest, and Mercury only sees the tree, if that makes any sense. So they both represent knowledge, but in a different way. They both represent knowledge. But Jupiter represents knowledge more in the way of deep significance, of the wisdom, of the cosmic understanding. And Mercury represents knowledge in terms of memorizing, everything like an accountant does, for example. An accountant memorizes the rules of a subject and applies those rules. So Mercury is knowledge in terms of applying something, and in terms of memorizing something and applying what you memorized on a more superficial level, whereas Jupiter is about deep cosmic understanding. For example, Jupiter rules Pisces. Pisces is the 12th house of the zodiac. The 12th sign of the zodiac, connected to the 12th house of the zodiac. Pisces is a sign of cosmic awareness. It is the universal sign. It is understanding at a cosmic level. You understand the deep spiritual significance of unity and infinity with Pisces. And Jupiter rules Sagittarius. And Sagittarius, is a man on a horse who's pointing an arrow and shoots that arrow. Jupiter wants to aim and to understand. And another thing that I wanted to point out, the signs, Pisces is a water sign, and Sagittarius is a fire sign. The fire signs are dharmic. They represent dharma. So Sagittarius is the natural 9th house of the zodiac, which is the house of wisdom. So the 9th house and wisdom have to do with Jupiter, which rules the 9th sign, which is Sagittarius, which is about wisdom in terms of a philosophical and spiritual level. Now, Mercury rules the 3rd house, the 3rd sign and the 6th sign of the zodiac. The 3rd sign, which is Gemini, represents our hands and our fingers. So it represents knowledge having to do with skill, the work that we do with our hands. So when we're crocheting, when we're drawing, when we're writing, or when we're doing anything having to do with skill, when we're the potter, making pots, making pottery, the person who's making whatever it is that they're making with their hands physically. So that's what Mercury represents in terms of knowledge, of knowing how to do things with your hands, memorizing a skill and applying that skill. And it rules Virgo, which is all about practicality. The sign of Virgo is about being practical. It's an earth sign. So being practical and applying what you learn to the material world in order to have sustainability, in order to be able to get things done. And, duty, the sixth house and the sign of Virgo have to do with the duty that we have to do. The Gemini is an air sign. So Gemini likes to think in an abstract way. Gemini is more the analyzer. Mercury in Virgo is more about applying what we learn in the real world in order to benefit from it on a practical, earthly level. But Mercury in Gemini is more about abstract thinking, of analyzing, playing Sudoku all day, or playing chess, or it's about just wanting to just do puzzles and analyzing and memorizing, and so that's kind of the difference between, they're both knowledge, but they're just different kinds of knowledge.
Yep, got it. Really clear now.
Huh?
I'm really clear now.
Yeah.
That's what I'm saying. So very, very, very nice. Yeah.
Yeah. And in the beginning, it does get confusing. Like, well, they both represent knowledge, but why? What's the difference? But yeah. So that's what makes them different in terms of what kind of knowledge. And so, yeah. And so you see also the difference between the sun. Or sorry, not the sun, the moon and Mercury and Jupiter. Whereas Jupiter represents wisdom, the moon represents intuition. The moon represents the subconscious mind, the deep, deep mind that is not, it represents our dreams, the dream world. When we go to sleep and we have dreams, the subconscious mind comes forward in our dreams and expresses itself. So all the impressions that we receive through the moon, through the mind, will show up in our dreams. The intuitive psychological aspect of our deep, deep mind will come forward through dreaming. So the moon represents the psychic aspect. The moon is the psychic, the intuition. The astral realm. The moon is the represents the astral, and you can see the astral at night. At night is when the astral beings come out. When you can see them, if you're able to see them, it's at nighttime. The astral world, the astral realm. Whereas, during the daytime, you cannot see any of this. During the daytime, we're all being active, so we are not able to be psychic at all. So the sun is not really psychic. The sun is more about power and control, and wanting to do things and get things done in the outer world, and wanting to express itself in that way. But the moon is the psychic. The moon is what sees, is the deep mind, and it is able to see the astral realms and the subtle levels of dimensions that we live in. It is able to perceive that aspect as well. And so that's the difference between between the moon, Jupiter, and Mercury. Jupiter is the wisdom, which is deep spiritual wisdom. It's the wisdom of knowing about. It's the wisdom of the spirit, right? But the moon is the psychic aspect. Just because, you're just receiving impressions. Those impressions can be beneficial or they can be detrimental. But the moon is just receptive. It's only reflecting back what it sees. when a person is psychic, it's only receiving the impressions. It doesn't. Now, where Mercury comes in, it analyzes those impressions. Mercury says, this is good, this is bad. This is good, this is bad. That's what Mercury does. It analyzes what the moon is receiving. The moon just receives. It's psychic. That's all it is. But Jupiter, on the other hand, is the having the spirit. It's discernment. So Jupiter discerns, knows how to discern. There's also a difference between Mercury and Jupiter in terms of discrimination. Mercury discriminates in order to analyze, in order to categorize. But it discriminates in terms of, okay, this goes here, this goes here, this goes here. But Jupiter discriminates in terms of being able to understand the spiritual, deep significance of things. And then the mind does the mind, which is the moon, doesn't discriminate at all. The moon just receives, and it's psychic, and it can see the astral realm. And I can actually go quickly if you guys want, since the class is almost over. But before I do this, did you want to add anything to that, Vikas, or anybody else?
Nope.
All right, so I will go through the conjunctions of the planets. And actually, this is also a deep subject in a way, so I'll start it, but if it gets, we might get so deep into it that we might continue it on the next slide. We'll see. We'll see. We'll play it by ear. So I'll kind of go over the conjunctions. So when the sun and the moon are together in a chart, the person, and the question that Jyotsna asked is, how does that play out? So when they're influencing each other, when it's a full moon, and I kind of already went over this, the person is more sensitive and nurturing and knows how to do that. When the sun and the moon are together, I think the sun takes over and just in a way overshadows the qualities of the moon. When the sun is influenced by Mars, okay, then we have two fiery planets being influenced each other. So I'll go over the sun first, the sun with the planets, and then I'll go over the moon with the planets. When Mars is influencing the sun, then there's a lot of fire when they're together or when they're aspecting each other. There's a lot of fire, a lot of willpower, a lot of assertiveness. So this is especially true if they're in the same house. The person tends to be very physical and aggressive sometimes. When it gets out of control, they can become aggressive. They are assertive and bold and fiery. They are also very competitive. Because both the sun and Mars are competitive planets. They both rule fire signs, and they are competitive in an assertive way. And this is why the sun and Mars do well in Upachaya houses, which are houses 3, 6, and 11. These are the Upachaya houses. They are the growing houses. These are the competitive houses. Especially house number 3 and number 6 are very competitive houses. So when you have Mars and Sun or any of the malefic planets in the house 3 or house 7, or house 6 or house 11, they do very well in these houses because they are competitive houses. The 3rd house and the 6th house are very competitive. Mars and Sun love these houses. They will fight. They will be assertive, competitive. There will be a lot of physical activity in these houses. When the shadow side shows itself, then the person can become overly competitive, overly aggressive, angry. They might not be able to control their anger if Sun and Mars are together, especially if they influence the moon. Like Vikas said earlier, that when the Mars aspects the moon, the person can be temperamental. When Mars aspects the moon, well, we'll get to that. But now when Mercury is with the Sun, the person, it's actually a Buddhi Aditya yoga. And what this means is that the person tends to be very intelligent. When Sun and Mercury are together, they tend to be very intelligent, even if Mercury is combust. Okay, so it doesn't matter if it is combust or not. The mind will be very, very intelligent. The mind will be analytical. The person will be communicative, verbal, mental. Their mind is always analyzing things. When it's combust, the way that it affects the person's life is on the material level. So whatever Mercury represents or rules, whatever houses it rules, it will affect that particular house when it's combust. But in terms of the mind, it doesn't matter if it's combust. The person will be very intelligent. And this goes with all the planets that are with the Sun. It doesn't matter which planet is with the Sun. The person will have the qualities of that planet because the Sun represents the personality, the way we express ourselves. So even if the planet is combust, like let's say Venus is with the Sun, okay, so the person will be charming, creative, sensual, artistic. They are attracted to people who are beautiful. They also want to show themselves in a beautiful way. They want to be attractive as well, because Venus is the planet of beauty and attraction and romance and love and affection. And so they want to be that way. They want to show themselves. They want to assert themselves in a charming way.
Hey, Monica.
Yes.
What do you mean by combust?
Combust is when, and that's a very good question, combust is when the Sun and the planet are together in less than within 7 degrees of each other in a chart. There's also people disagree on this, and there's levels of combustion. Some people say that a planet is combust within 12 degrees of the Sun. I personally go with what one of my Gurujis says, which is one of the Gurujis says is that it is combust within 6 or 7 degrees. And beyond that, like beyond 8 degrees, to me it's not really that combust. But there's levels, so you just tweak it. You just, obviously if it's within 2 degrees of the Sun, and you can tell by the degrees in the chart, it'll say like in the chart, if it says the Sun is at 15 degrees, if Venus is at 17 degrees, then they're 2 degrees apart. If Venus is at 22 degrees, then they're 7 degrees apart. So to me, they're really combust when they're within 6 degrees or 7 degrees. Then they're pretty combust. Beyond that, the combust aspect of the Sun becomes less and less. So the further away it gets from the Sun, the less combust it becomes, and the less afflicted the planet will be in terms of the houses that it rules.
Yep. So in general, combustion means an English word combustion, right? Anything that goes near the fire will get burned. So the same thing with planetary bodies too. Anything that is near to the Sun gets burnt, basically. That is combustion.
Yep, correct. So it will get burned in terms of the physical manifestation of the person's life. So whatever the house rules, whatever the planet rules, whatever houses it rules, it will combust those houses. It will, and we'll talk about this in more intermediate classes. But for now, when the sun is together with a planet, whether that planet is combust or not, the internal aspects of the planet will be there. So the internal aspects, meaning when sun is with Venus, the person is creative and artistic and wants to express itself in a creative, artistic way. The person might like to play music or draw or dance or sing. That will still be there, even if Venus is combust. Even if Venus is combust within 2 or 3 degrees, it doesn't matter. Venus is still going to have its influence on the sun, which represents the body, the personality, the outward aspect of ourselves, the way we express ourselves in the world. And so that's regardless of if it's combust. So when we're analyzing the psychology, then obviously we take into account other planets that are also affecting the sun. So or Venus. Like if Venus is combust and aspected by Saturn and aspected by Rahu, that sort of thing, then you can say that the psychology might be a little bit twisted. But for now, we're just going to assume that the sun is with Venus by itself with no other significations. So when the planets are with the sun, they will influence the personality. So when Jupiter's with the sun, then Jupiter has an expansive influence. It expands anything that it conjoins or aspects. So when the sun is with Jupiter, then the confidence goes up. Then the person has a lot of confidence. The person tends to be very optimistic towards life. They tend to be enthusiastic about life. They're bubbling. They're just really outgoing and bubbling and happy, and they have high confidence. They feel they can achieve anything in life because Jupiter is very optimistic. With Jupiter, anything is possible. If Jupiter will grant it if Jupiter is influencing that particular aspect. So with the sun, the person just is very optimistic. And the person can be spiritual as well, because Jupiter is the planet of spirituality and wisdom. So this will also give the person wisdom and inclination towards spirituality. When Saturn is with the sun, Saturn tends to constrict and restrict anything that it influences. So it tends to have a restrictive nature, which is the opposite of the sun. The sun shines and gives out energy. The Saturn restricts that energy and tries to bundle it up and put it in a box and restrict it. So when the sun is with Saturn, then Saturn tends to take away the energy of the sun, and it makes the person become very self-conscious. So the person is not able to express themselves naturally in a spontaneous way. The person tends to be more self-conscious with more self-esteem issues. They don't trust themselves to express themselves. They feel awkward when they feel awkward in general when the Saturn aspects the sun. They don't want to express themselves spontaneously. They analyze every action that they do. They analyze it in terms of convention. So they also tend to be more conservative people. They want to abide by social convention, and they want to just follow the rules, and they want to just be like Saturn, which Saturn just wants to follow the rules and do the ritual. So just do the ritual for the sake of doing the ritual, not really for the essence behind the ritual, but it's just more about following convention and just doing things that you have to do because that's the duty of it. But they feel awkward expressing and over projecting themselves. So they will not, so the positive quality of this conjunction is that the person will not be intrusive in terms of they will let other people shine. They have a way of connecting with people, because since Saturn restricts their ego, they are able to be more humble. So humility is one of the aspects of Saturn with the sun. The person knows how to be humble, or Saturn with the moon as well. So there's, there's a positive, there's a shadow side. So the person knows how to be humble, and at the same time, they're just reserved. They tend to be hesitant before they act. They don't just act on impulse, but they tend to be hesitant and reserved. But they also are hard workers. Saturn is the planet of hard work. And so the Saturn and Sun, when they're together in a chart, the person just works every day, 7 days a week. And they take duty. Duty is very important to them. So they will be hard workers, they will be very responsible, and they will be dependable. Saturn's earth quality brings the practical side of the sun, and so they make that person be dependable and persevering. So the person has their 2 feet on the ground. When Rahu is with the sun, the person projects their personality with extra energy, with extra oomph. So they over project their personality. Donald Trump has Rahu and Sun together in the chart, and you can see that. You can see, Donald Trump, he over projects his personality. Rahu, when the sun is with Rahu, the sun is on steroids. It's like the sun on steroids, that it's like the sun already has too much sun, but with Rahu, it's like too much sun on drugs. Like, it's like they overly, and it depends where they are in the chart also, of course, and who they're aspected by, etc., etc. But in general, Rahu will overly expand the sun in an exaggerated way. They love being in the center of attention. They love projecting their personality, but they also tend to be overly dominant. They tend to want to be overly authoritarian, overly in charge, that kind of stuff. They make them very obsessed with their career, because the sun represents career. It represents status in life. So when Rahu is with the sun, the person becomes obsessed about status, about career, so it makes them very ambitious when it comes to career. The person just wants to succeed at all cost. They want to have a good status in life. They want to be in the public's eye. They want to be, at the top in their status. They want to be respected and honored and have the best career, etc. When Ketu is with the sun, then it's like the total opposite of Rahu with the sun. When Ketu is with the sun, the person tends to be more spiritually introverted, spiritually inclined, introverted. They tend to not want to be in the public eye necessarily. It depends on other factors in the chart. But they tend to be more introspective, so they know how to go within. Ketu tends to cause a void wherever Ketu is in the chart, and wherever Ketu is connected with whatever planet Ketu is connected with, it tends to cause a void. So there tends to be like the planet tends to disappear. When Ketu is influencing a planet, that planet tends to disappear. It tends to become out of sight. So there's a void when the sun is with Ketu. The person might feel invisible sometimes, like other people are not noticing them. like even if the sun person is trying to, the sun K2 person is trying to express themselves or trying to, they feel ignored by other people. They feel like people are not giving them the recognition that they deserve. On the other hand, they might just not want that recognition. They might just prefer to be invisible. They might not want to be in the public's eye. It also makes the person intuitive, and it gives spiritual inclinations, and it makes the person very spiritually inclined. It can also make the person psychic, because the person becomes more intuitive, more introspective. So there can be some psychic, anytime K2 is connected with the moon or the sun, the person will have psychic qualities. Hold on, just 1 second. Just 1 second, guys. Okay, so JJ's asking me how long the class. So I think I'm gonna end it here with just the sun's conjunctions, and I can pick it up in the next class because it's already a little past 3:30.